Welcome to the Scoreboard Sports Podcast, presented by no one. I'm Connor Kendall. I'm joined by Cameron Clark. Cam,
How's it going?
were you thinking we had someone there for a sec? Or
Did for a little bit, yeah. I was like, oh, sweet, we got a sponsor already, or maybe he'll just like pull something out of thin air. I don't know, but it was pretty good.
it was thin air. It's thin air. Hey, we got a little more time left. Maybe
Yeah.
someone will jump on board. Busy last couple days in the sports world,
Yeah.
surprisingly. Not getting out on the topics yet, but just a lot of NFL news. We got a big college basketball game coming up tomorrow.
Only a little. Yeah, not
Just
too
a little
big.
bit.
Yeah.
A little bit in the state. The opponent, there's some opponent news referring to them. That was pretty big. Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty good last couple days.
Weekend. Since we are in the state of Utah, I got to give a shout out to the Utah ski team. One of their players, skiers, I don't know, took first in
Skiers,
nationals
yeah.
today. Congrats to whoever that guy was.
Nice.
I was sledding one time up at somewhere. It's up in Park City somewhere, I think, for Sundance. I don't know, somewhere. But while we were doing the tubing things, they were having the NCAA ski championships at the same time.
Yeah, that was at Deer Valley. The
Yeah,
skier
that's where it
champion
was.
at Deer Valley. Yeah,
Yeah, so I was there and I was like, oh, hey, look, they're skiing. There's a lot of
yeah, it's crazy.
So, cool.
Yeah, shout out to my boss. He's very involved, or was very involved, with the U.S. Ski jumping team. He was a coach. He coached a couple Olympic teams. He was on the Olympic staff for many Olympics. So he was very invested in that world, and that's the only reason why I knew that was happening. I think other than that, I would have had no idea.
That's sweet, though.
Well, Cam, how's your night been? I know we kind of started this one a little late, but
Yeah, it's been pretty good. It's, 10:50 our time. Usually we record these, 8 or 9 o'clock. But I was at the BYU-USC volleyball game tonight, hoping that BYU could pull out the win over number 5 USC. BYU's number 6. Lost in 5. It was a heartbreak. I've been to 2 men's games this year. Both of them have gone 5 sets, and both of them past the 15. I went to Hawaii. That was like a 22-20 Hawaii won in the 5th set, and then tonight USC won 23-21. So they've been very exciting games, just heartbreakers.
sounds like it. Geez, both. Well, for your games, both 5 sets. Geez,
Yeah.
that's a lot of. Gosh, that's intense volleyball. I mean, high levels. I mean, I would say BYU's conference is probably top in the nation, right, in terms of
Yeah.
volleyball conferences and strength. I mean, from my knowledge, I mean, we've got the Cougs, USC. Is UCLA still pretty good?
I think so, yeah. I know also the Big West Conference is pretty good. They've got UC Irvine, UC Santa Barbara, Hawaii,
Okay, yeah.
Long Beach, I think. So those 2 conferences, them and the MSPF, Mountain Pacific Sports, MPSF, maybe? Whatever it is. Those 2 usually go toe-to-toe just in terms of conference strength.
It's really interesting to think that there's these separate conferences just for volleyball. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of, I mean, unless I'm wrong, but I mean, I don't think Big 12 is aligned with men's volleyball, are they? No, just
No,
women's.
I think they've only got 2 teams. Maybe just BYU might be the only team in the Big 12 that has a men's volleyball team, at least
But
as far
yeah,
as
but not
competes.
branded, no branding for the Big 12. That's kind of interesting. Speaking of it, yeah. No, you go.
I saw someone in the Big 12, like the Big 12 from us. They've got like San Diego State, Florida's in the Big 12 in lacrosse. The weirdest, I don't know, weird.
That was the same with wrestling. I know wrestling, the Big 12 has a couple schools that you wouldn't think. One being UVU, actually,
Yeah.
is in the Big 12 for wrestling. And I don't know when I found that out, but I was like, that's actually kind of cool. But
UVU's wrestling team's pretty good. I think one of their wrestlers beat an Oklahoma State wrestler. And Oklahoma State usually is top of the pack in terms of wrestling. So
really,
yeah, that was some big. I don't really follow wrestling a whole lot. My high school beat our rival finally in wrestling for the first time in like 30 years. And ended up winning 3 in a row. So we had the battle of the axe for a while. Yeah, wrestling's kind of cool. I haven't gotten too into it. Not really sure how the scoring works and everything, but it's a good sport.
no, it's a great sport. I mean, my high school was they've had a pretty deep wrestling culture, I guess you could say. The men's, when I was there, was pretty talented, and then soon after I left, women's wrestling came in and became a sanctioned Utah high school sport, and that women's team has won like 2 or 3 state championships in a row, which is insane. I guess we're a powerhouse in women's wrestling.
Yeah.
Which is
my
kind
high
of funny to
school's
say. But
my high school is pretty good with women's wrestling as well. I think they have the top 2 wrestlers in the state. To side, like obviously different weight classes and everything, but that's like the one thing our high school can hang its hat on, that and our drill team that wins state pretty consistently. But everything else we're not great.
yeah, my sister, she's on the drill team all 4 years of high school, and I always thought they were, what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't viewed in the highest light, even though they were a really good team. I think they made state every single year she was on the team. And in drill, I guess you can make it to state, but then there's a section of the championships.
Yeah.
I guess it's like a play-ins, I guess you could say. And there were a couple of years where they didn't make it in, but when they did, they were the wild card. There's wild cards, and every time they were the wild card, and every time when they were the wild card into the championship round, last place in every category. It's like, what's the point of having these wild cards? Because it is the same for no matter what school won the wild card. You're just the bottom in every category, because in the drill world you have the Farmingtons, you have the Davises, you have the PGs. I know too much about drill. Don't judge, but
I feel you. Farmington's a powerhouse.
No, but
crazy.
To touch back on, but before we went on this tangent, I was going to say interesting news coming out of BYU women's basketball. Speaking of, on the topic of women's athletics, Amber Whiting is rumored. I think it's just rumored.
I think it is still a rumor.
Expected for her to part ways. Now, the reason why I brought this up and why I think it's interesting, not because I don't think she deserves to leave or for the athletic department to fire her, because she's under 500 in her 3-4 seasons.
3 years, 46 and 51.
So, by all means, she's not been performing well. She hasn't gotten the team up to the standards of the alumni, of the donors. What I think is interesting and what got my mind thinking is who is making this decision. With the announcement of Tom Holmoe stepping down, retiring, he announced in early February, I believe. If he's making this decision, or if they already have their new athletic director and they just haven't announced yet. If so, I think from what I thought, if it's internal and this is the new athletic director, then it has to be Brian Santiago, who's under Tom Holmoe right now and is rumored to take the job. But that kind of got my brain thinking a little bit as to who's making this call.
Yeah, I saw Tom Holmoe at the game tonight, so I think he is still making this decision. And especially with the news like as big as an athletic director, I think especially if you were going into a head coaching search, like I think obviously for the outside candidates, they would have to know who the athletic director is. So my guess is they haven't hired anyone yet. But yeah, I think this is a super interesting move. I've got class with a girl on the basketball team, and then I've also shadowed Jason Shepard, who's the radio play-by-play of the team, and then the sports information director for the women's team is in my bishopric, actually.
Okay.
I say. So I've got like all these weird connections to the team, but it's going to be really interesting. I'm really hoping that Lee Kumard, I think is his name, becomes the head coach. He's the assistant head coach right now.
Okay.
I like him a lot. A lot of the girls really like him. They have a good relationship with him. Coaching staff this year seemed to be doing well, but kind of echo that statement that it may be time for Whiting to go. It sucks because I think you're going to have a decent amount of players enter the transfer portal. Her daughter being one of them. I'm sure what's her name? Why is it blanking on me all of a sudden? It's her daughter, Whiting. It's Amber and...
Pulled up here.
There, yeah. I was like, I know it has an I in it. Yeah, I think Amari probably transfers because of this. But the big one I worry about is Delaney Gibb. Yeah, Delaney Gibb, Big 12 freshman of the year. She was ranked number 45, I think, coming out of high school. She all Big 12, second team. It's going to be really interesting to see if she sticks around. She could go to anywhere in the country that she wants. That's how good she is. That last game against Utah, last conference game, she had 36 points and 10 rebounds. So she's the future of this program if they can keep her. And she, I think, is how we avoid going into full rebuild mode. Because I think if Gibb and Whiting leaves, which I think Whiting will, I think that turns this into a rebuilding program, and I think it takes a couple years to get back to where we were, where Jeff Judkins was the head coach. But I think if you have an internal hiring, I don't think there's as big a rebuild. I think you get still a good amount of girls stay.
No, I agree 100%. I think the number one worry is getting a coach who is one either internally, which keeps the players grounded, avoids big numbers in the transfer portal, and if I'm not mistaken, they have a big recruit that flipped, right, out of Oregon. I thought I saw some, unless that girl's already on the team. I could have sworn there was a big commit out of the state of Oregon. I don't know if she was committed to Oregon. She might have been committed to Oregon, flipped to BYU. So I think there was a couple high-profile commits. Those are also what I'm worried about because those seemed like key building blocks to get this program back on its feet. No, I thought that story was very interesting in terms of the inside of the athletic department and who's making this decision. If it's Tom in cahoots with soon-to-be new athletic director, or if it's just Tom finishing it out. Or I thought it was very interesting and got me thinking.
Yeah, it also gets me. While we're on the topic of coaches, we might as well talk about Alex Jensen being hired as Utah's head coach. I mean, we talked about this on the podcast last episode, and so I thought it was really cool that they announced that he would be the new head coach, because I think this is a phenomenal hire for Utah. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit to get the NIL running. I'd say give it 2 years. So next year, I think they'll be obviously better than this year, but I think come 2 years, they'll be kind of where BYU has been these last 2 years. Obviously, they're going to take a jump. BYU is when they start getting all these really good recruits, but I think Utah will now be top half of the Big 12 and in contention for a tournament spot every year. It's hiring.
No, it's a great hire out of Utah. Like you said, when we talked about it last episode, I was in the court of, if I'm Alex Jensen, I'm not sure if I want to take this job. The pressure of the history of the program, I mean, yes, it's my alma mater. Pressure. I'll have all the pressure from the university. It's a great hire. I'm glad in terms of competition that it may be on the rise for Utah. It almost seems like Utah saw BYU's move and they're playing chess. Like, okay, well, you made a top assistant hire. We'll make a top NBA assistant hire. I think the NIL money, like you said, is going to come slowly, but I think they probably have a good ground there. I mean, if they can transition the football donors and split them or get them to donate over to the men's basketball, I mean, we may have a pretty good team as soon as BYU did.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Young was able to rebuild and keep this program afloat after the departure of Mark Pope. But
I think this is a program-saving move
pickup
for Utah.
Yeah, and I think this determines the fate of, Mark Harlan's job.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is what the donors, I think this is what the alumni, what the people in the Crimson Club wanted. I think this is who they wanted to begin with before they even hired Craig Smith. This is who they wanted, and Mark Harlan said, I'm going to go with my guy, which I think with his ego, he was able to realize, I made the wrong decision, so I'm going to go with who you guys told me to go with in the first place. I'm interested to see if they get Andre Miller, if he signs on as an assistant, because it sounded like he was in the talks as being hired for the head coach. There was rumors that he wasn't comfortable taking on that much of responsibility, or maybe it just wasn't his cup of tea, I guess we can say. I've also heard that with him, he's a coach in the G League. I don't think he's a head coach. I think he's just like an assistant or like some position coach in the G League, but that he's like a real grinder. Like he'll toughen you up. Like, so I'm interested to see if he will get hired on or in the talks of that. I know he's mentioned about coming back to Utah and that he loves Utah. He loves Utah basketball. So that I think that will be something to look out for and keep an eye out.
Really good for the Runnin' Utes and their program, which I'm going to go give me like 20 seconds. The fact that they call themselves the Running Utes, I don't love it. It's like the stupidest thing ever. Like, oh yeah, we're the Running Cougs. We're the Running Blue Devils. Like, just call yourself the Utes.
Well, I don't understand. It's just basketball.
Yeah.
It's just basketball that goes with that. I'm sure it's just in tradition. I mean, I'm sure when Rick Majerus was coaching, I'm sure that was just kind of the brand, I guess.
Yeah.
You could say. I mean, we're too young to live through those days, but I'm sure
Majerus was a good coach. I think this Alex Jensen hire can bring the rivalry back to where it was underneath Majerus. Because obviously that Utah team,
Majerus,
that Utah team under Majerus, obviously, Final Four capability. Obviously, BYU right now, there's lots of people on Twitter saying, let me phrase this. There's lots of experts on Twitter saying, watch out for this BYU team. They're a scary team. It's going to be interesting for sure. With Rick Majerus, like where that program was at the Final Four, now the experts on Twitter with BYU saying, hey, watch out for this team. They're capable of making a run in March. Right? Like, I'm excited to see where these two teams end up in terms of the rivalry. Because BYU has the lead right now, 134 to 131. You take the last 10 games, they're 5-5. Like, BYU, obviously, these last couple of years has been a lot better than Utah, but the fact that it's a rivalry game has, played a role in that. These teams are 5-5. Utah having won the last two.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're a little delayed there, but I'm a piggyback off of that. I mean, Final Four team. I think they even reached the final in '98 and lost to a Mark Pope-led Kentucky team, which is kind of funny when you think about it. If I'm BYU looking at it in terms of the rivalry standpoint, I might be nervous. Like you said, we're split in the last 10 games. As a Big 12 point of view, I'm ecstatic. I mean, this will just strengthen the conference, hopefully. Crossing your fingers that it pans out as well as Utah's expecting it to.
During Rick Majerus' time, like, I'm 20. How old are you, Connor?
How old am I? I'm 24. I had to think about that for a second.
You're like, wait a minute.
Right, it's easy for me. I was born in 2000, so whatever year it is, that's the year I'm turning. Anyway.
Yeah, so like we were both, born in this century, and so we didn't get to see the Utes in their heyday, But with Rick Majerus, he had those Final Four teams with Andrew Bogut, Andre Miller, Alex Jensen was on those teams, Keith Van Horn.
Was he I don't think Majerus didn't win the championship, did he?
No.
No, that wasn't. No.
I think the last time, they won the championship, I think it was 1944 or something like that.
It was like in a time where the big dance wasn't really the big dance. It was like kind of flipped, where the NIT, I think, was the more predominant tournament at the time. Yeah,
1943 to 1944, Utes won the NCAA tournament, first of two national titles, 4 seasons. They're one of 7 teams that have reached the NCAA Sweet 16 in every decade. So that's kind of cool.
I wonder if they'll reach it this decade.
Probably not, but who knows? Maybe with this Alex Jensen hiring, right? Like we were talking that this is going to be a program-changing move, right? You're going to start seeing these recruits coming in who says, okay, this guy, he can help me get to the NBA. He knows exactly what coaches are looking for. He knows how things work in the NBA. In the world of college sports where it's a one-and-done type deal now, Utah obviously hasn't had a lot of one-and-dones, but with a coach like Alex Jensen, we talked about Andre Miller's most likely going to be joining the coaching staff. This will be a really, really good move for the Utah basketball program.
It's interesting. I mean, when we're comparing apples to oranges, I guess, in terms of Alex Jensen and, why
Kevin Young?
Yes, Kevin Young. Why did I just have a brain freeze? When you're comparing, I mean, Kevin Young can pull up his phone book.
Yeah.
Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Giannis. You go to Alex Jensen, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Luka Doncic. Like, it's very similar, and it's in terms of competing with their rivals, it is a very good move. I like the energy that they will not make the Sweet 16 this decade.
Bold take. Does BYU make the Sweet 16 this decade? I don't know. I hope so. I really do. But
call me crazy. I think they make the Sweet 16 this year. This dance.
Awesome. They got to beat the 2 seed or the 1 seed, depending on if they're a 7 or an 8. But
call me crazy again. First. I think they surpass 7. I think they make a good run in the tournament.
Okay.
And I think they get placed I think they can get placed as a 6 seed. I've seen in some of the bracketologies across different platforms, their lowest is a 9 seed. And I think we touched about this last episode. I don't see that happening. But their peak on some brackets are a 5 seed. I don't know if I see that happening unless they win the Big 12. I like the 7 spot that they're projected, I think, in ESPN's right now. I would like it for a 6. Although, looking at the bracket that Joe Lunardi came out with, I really like, if this were to be the bracket, I really like where they're placed at, where they have Ohio State as the 7-10 matchup. Then they have Bama, which I like Bama. Bama's kind of a scary team in terms of, I think that they're pretty good offensively. I think we can beat them. I think we have just as powerful, just as talented of an offense as they do. I think our defense is probably better than theirs, if I'm being honest. We're on a hot streak. So if you look at this quadrant of the East, I really like it for BYU. If they can get past Bama, I don't see how they couldn't reach the Elite Eight.
Yeah. One thing, I like that idea. If BYU can get past that second round matchup, I think they've got a good chance of making the Elite Eight.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I've been playing around with Evan Miyakawa's website. It's evanmiya.com. So EVANMIYA.com. And he's just another like Ken Palm type guy where he has all these ratings and stuff. But they had him on BYU Sports Nation a while ago, and so I kind of got interested in his website. So he ranks like the top defensive teams. Because I think if you place BYU against some really tough defensive teams, I think that's where they're going to struggle. Obviously, the one anomaly to that is Kansas. They throttled Kansas. But you look at that first West Virginia game, you look at Houston, you look at Iowa State, all these teams are top 15 in his rankings for defense. And I mean, Kansas is number 7, but I mean, that's an anomaly. But you look at those are the teams I don't want to play. But looking at where Alabama's at, Alabama's defense is ranked 31. So I would much rather see an Alabama type team than, a team like Houston or a team like Iowa State again, or even a team like West Virginia.
No, 100%. I think I can't remember if it was like the Royal Flash or what BOU account on Instagram posted if we would want to play Iowa State, whether that's in the conference tournament or March Madness. I want nothing to do with Iowa State again.
Yeah.
I do not want anything to do. They played us on defense so well. The other part of that is Big 12 refs, I feel like, let the game play. They allow a lot of physicality, and Iowa State is very physical defensively. But I don't want to play another Iowa State game. I don't want to play another team like Iowa State. I think if we were to match up against Houston again, I think it would be a different outcome. Not necessarily a win, I would say. I think we wouldn't get throttled. But I want to play the Alabamas. I would even want to play the West Virginias. I think West Virginia is a very strong defensive team, as you mentioned, in terms of rankings. But I think BYU handled their defense a lot better than Iowa State's. Clearly, Houston's. But
BYU could outshoot teams if it's going to be an offensive power matchup. But I think when it comes to that other team being a top 10, top 15 defensive, powerhouse, that's where BYU has kind of struggled this year. We saw it with Iowa State. We saw it with Houston. We saw it in that first game against West Virginia where, it was kind of a nail biter. And we saw it even in the first half against West Virginia this last time out. But in his rankings, he has the Big 12 as the number 1 defensive conference and number 3 on the offense. So he has them ranked at number 2, right behind the SEC, obviously. Where I'm getting with all this is, the Big 12 obviously is officiated a lot differently than the rest of the country. There's a lot more physicality. So come tournament time, it'll be interesting to see what refs you have. Are they going to let you be a little more physical, right? I think that BYU benefits from the refs not allowing as much physicality, right? You have Yegor, who's 6'9", being guarded by someone who's 6'2", right? He's going to be all over the place down there, right? That's super hard for Yegor to get by, right? There's a big reason that Yegor has as many turnovers as he does. But if BYU can have a team where they say, okay, we know we're not the greatest defensive team, but our strong suit's offense. I think in an offense-to-offense matchup, I think BYU is going to come out on top.
100%, especially with Kevin Young scheming in his play design. BYU wins every offensive battle that they go against. I strongly believe that. In terms of what you're pointing out, refs, how the officiating is going to be in the tournament, I feel like BYU's track record has not been great. If you look, just last year against Duquesne was pretty physical. They were a pretty good defensive team. Then again, there were a lot of mistakes left on the floor. But the first thought that popped in my head was 2011 Sweet 16 against Florida. Jimmer's bleeding on the court. I think when he got that shot taken to his face, I don't think there was even a foul called. So with BYU's luck, with they're not. I don't see how they get a good ref matchup, as I don't think it's written in the stars or plotted against us. But
yeah, we'll see. First though, we got to beat Utah, right? This weekend. Utah obviously beat us last time out on their home court. We took them to overtime. But I don't see how BYU wins by less than 15.
I don't see how they lose this game, period. I think the emotion behind losing to them in Salt Lake in overtime is gonna get the motivation up a little bit. Them coming off an emotional, draining win against Iowa State, that is the only thing that might concern me, is that they might have exhausted everything they had into beating Iowa State. But it's senior night. I don't see how you can allow your rival to come into your building and beat you on senior night. Especially in preps and the hot streak that you have been on, there's no way they lose this game.
Kevin Young, they just released it in the cut, his message to the team after the win. He said, the tides have turned. Let's see what he said. You're not punking BYU. We're doing the punking. Yeah. Right? Gives me reminiscence. Hema Hemuli tweeted out that video alongside the you don't know, but you're about to find out. Right? Those two videos together, right? That's kind of the mentality that I see BYU coming into this game with, right? BYU recognizes, obviously Kevin Young, he grew up in Atlanta, so he grew up watching these games. Obviously, he's been a BYU fan his entire life, but it hasn't been as close to home for him, right? And obviously with players like Yegor and with Cannon Catchings, I almost said Kava Keita, but it's definitely there for Keita. But for some of these big name guys like Boscovich and Moet Mag, right, it's not as big of a deal for them, this referee game. But after losing that game in Salt Lake City, Utah awoke the beast, right? I think that Utah loss is what catapulted BYU into where their season is at. Right, you had that loss to TCU, you had that loss to Providence. Those were BYU's two worst losses of the year, according to Evan Mia. But that Utah loss, I think, is kind of what pushed us. We beat Colorado right after that. Not only did we beat them, we swamped them. Right, then we come back home and we, win a game or two. I forget exactly the schedule. Right, but after that loss to Arizona and then Cincinnati, BYU's on a 7-game win streak, right? About to make it 8. And we'll see Iowa State most likely again Thursday morning at 11 in the Big 12 tournament. BYU's got to get started right here with this win against Utah, and it's got to propel them even another step forward if they want to make a good run in both the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament.
In terms of seeding, BYU's locked down the 4 seed, I believe. Can they get the 3 seed if Arizona loses to Kansas?
I don't think so, because Arizona has the tiebreaker over us because we went 1-1, but Arizona beat Texas Tech, and Texas Tech beat us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw that, and I knew there was going to be a tiebreaker somewhere, but I did not know what the matchup would be. Anyway, scratch that out. My other comment was going to be, can this BYU team be the NC State of last year, where NC State, no one had any thought that they were going to make the tournament. I think they were one of the lowest seeds in the ACC tournament. They go on to win the thing, and then they make it to the Final Four.
Yeah. So obviously I didn't get to watch that team last year, but I did my best to follow along. So NC State, if I remember right, so they weren't going to make the tournament, but then they won the ACC tournament, so that propelled them forward. Then as an 11 seed, they made the Final Four. And now they just became, I think, the first team in NCAA history to not make their conference tournament after winning it the year before. But with NC State...
Well, if you put it like that, I don't want to be this year's NC State then.
I mean, luckily for the Big 12, everyone makes the tournament. I think because of the run that BYU is on right now, I think they've, they don't know, but they're about to find out. The country has found out BYU is. They've realized that people aren't punking BYU, but that BYU is doing the punking. Right? With wins over Kansas, Iowa State, and Arizona, the country's on notice. Right? I don't think people would be surprised if you see BYU be a 1 seed if they're an 8 or a 2 seed if they're a 7 seed. Right? I think it almost comes as, this is, if you want to pick a Cinderella team, BYU is going to be a good team to pick, right? What I want to avoid is a 6-11 matchup where UC San Diego sneaks in at an 11, and then we get stuck facing them, right? I think if we want to talk about an NC State, as far as like a low seed making a run in the NCAA tournament, I think that's the UC San Diego team is going to be one to watch.
I haven't followed up on UC San Diego this year, but...
I haven't watched many of their games, but like that's what everyone's saying. So I'm just kind of like, that doesn't come from me. That comes from everyone else. UC San Diego, I guess, has been going on a tear this year, but yeah.
No, I just wonder how the core of my eye is paying attention to this game tomorrow, but my focus is on the tournament. I've been watching a lot of media and Drake Toll on Locked On Big 12. He's putting BYU at the top of the Big 12 right now. Over Houston in terms of momentum, I think, out of the last stretch of games, he's saying that they're the most complete team. I mean, Kevin Sampson's Houston team is defensively dominant, as we've mentioned before on this episode. I feel like BYU's team is just so the defensive side lacks in little spots here and there, but I feel like overall it is so round. It is very complementary basketball. And in those episodes on Locked On Big 12, he would not be shocked in the slightest if BYU makes the championship game or just straight out wins the conference. And so I guess my point is, I don't know what my point is, I guess. It's interesting to think because that will be the first conference win the Cougs have had since the Mountain West days.
Here's my thing. Because of the way, where BYU is seated right now, honestly, I think BYU would benefit more from being a 6 seed than they are from being a 4 seed.
100%.
Here's why I say that, because if you're a 4 seed, you're going to play Iowa State, but that's not where I'm going with this. But, that next game is Houston. So you'd have to beat Houston to even make it to the tournament championship game.
And having double bye, I am always, especially in the NFL, in playoffs, I feel like having a bye is such... In theory, it seems great, but you build momentum off of games. And if you have a week off, you get cold. You don't have that propelling momentum from a game prior. And in the Big 12 tournament, the top 4 seeds have double byes.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think it's too big of a deal with the double bye because it's only a 1 day. So the teams 5 through 8, right, they've got the 1 day bye, but then they've got to, if they win their game that day, they've got to turn around that next day and play. So I think it's a bit different where the NFL is, you get that whole week off, right? In the MLB where you get, a couple days off. But I think where it's like a back-to-back day sort of thing. I definitely agree with you. Momentum is lost for those bye teams and gained for those lower seeded teams with wins. But yeah, it's I guess that's my take on it.
No, you make a good point. I mean, I think BYU last year displayed that very well. They won their first matchup, and then they're just, I feel like, kind of ran out of gas, ran out of a little bit of steam in their next matchup against Kansas State? No? Was it Kansas State? I want to say Kansas State, but that just does not sound right.
I'll look it up. But in the meantime, what are your, bold predictions for the game tomorrow?
Bold predictions. I think BYU continues their hot streak from the charity line. I don't know if Richie's going to go perfect again this game. I think he might miss 1 or 2. I think the team will shoot a respectable 75% from the line at least. I don't think that will be the determining factor in the game, though. I think, contrary to what we were saying in terms of BYU's offensive dominance, I think they'll put on I won't say masterclass, but they'll put on a very good defensive showing and shut the Utes down. I mean, the Utes in this point of the season, I feel like are like a wounded puppy. I don't know where they get the energy, the drive, the like to win and come out and beat BYU on this floor. I mean, unless they have Alex Jensen out in the crowd, I mean, I don't see how they perform to the best like they did in the first matchup.
And here's where I think like the only chance the Utes have is if Gabe Madsen can get going and hit threes. Because last game against BYU, he went 1 for 11 from three. It's his only game this year where he's made less than 2 threes. And so I think if Utah wants a shot, Gabe Madsen needs to have Richie Saunders like shooting percentage from 3. Right? He's obviously the Utah all-time leading scorer. Utah all-time leading 3-pointers made. So I think he needs to have a big game. I forget his name, but number 2 for Utah kind of dominated BYU last game. But even with all that, I think BYU wins this one pretty handily. My guess, 83-65, where I kind of see this game ending up. I think the first couple minutes could be a bit of a close game. Because it's a rivalry game, obviously there's going to be jitters. But I think BYU takes maybe like a 10-point lead into the second half, then just kind of pulls away from there. But I think Keita gets minimized a little bit this game, actually. I think he only has maybe 6 rebounds. But I think Foose comes in. Foose has a big game down low. I think Boscovich, in his couple minutes, he plays a good game. But here's what I'm looking for. Trey Stewart and Trevin Nell, right? Homegrown kids. The rivalry means something to them. They're either going to have really big games or they're going to have really bad games. But I'm leaning with the big games for them. Trevin Nell and Trey Stewart, look for them to be a driving force for BYU there.
I can almost see this playing out as a game where Kevin Young changes things up. Obviously, the focus of this team is Richie Saunders. And going into March, you can only guarantee that the opposing team, whoever you're facing, is going to eye in on Richie and have game plans surrounding him. So I wonder if this is a game where KY kind of starts getting that rolling as to, okay, they're probably going to have the same mindset. We got to prepare for this for the Big 12 tournament for March. I can also see a really good game out of Down Hall. Down, I think he's a local kid, grown up in this rivalry as well. I think he can have a good game when he splits the minutes with Yegor. I'm still waiting. I feel like the last couple games for Yegor have been very lackluster, to say the least. And I'm just waiting for the game where you look at him and say, yeah, he's the lottery pick. If he has the passing, that for sure is NBA level. I want to see the unbelievable skill, like handling, like shooting, like smart shots. That's the part where I'm hoping comes out in this game.
I think that game probably comes in the NCAA tournament, the Yegor. Or maybe, yeah, I'd have to say NCAA tournament because I think Utah is a good enough defensive team, and Yegor kind of was rattled a bit last time they played them. But I think Iowa State will be a tough matchup for him again, and obviously if they beat Iowa State, they got to play Houston. But I think that first round matchup, whether it's Ohio State, VCU, Utah State, whoever it ends up being, I think that's kind of where Yegor shines and kind of starts to take over, is in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, it'll be his first March Madness, but I mean, he played with Real Madrid over in Spain, and European basketball is a bit different as far as they have a lot bigger like tournaments than we do here over in the States. And so I think Yegor, if you're waiting for Yegor to kind of break out of his shell and become who the lottery pick Yegor, I guess, should be, if you want to call it that, I think that happens in the NCAA tournament.
From a coaching standpoint, I know catching is still day to day. If let's say he's good to go or he can play, if you're Kevin Young, are you playing him or are you resting him to make sure he's 100% for the tournament.
I don't think he gets as many minutes. I think Trey Stewart takes some of his minutes. I think there's a couple factors. Trey Stewart's defense obviously is incredible. With it being senior night, I could see him giving Trey a little bit more minutes. But yeah, I'd probably say, like, if he does play, I don't think it's as much as like a regular game for Cannon. But I think they kind of make sure he's full strength come Big 12 tournament time.
I agree. I can almost see in the tournament, whether it's specifically March, from Cannon especially, he's already had so many of these moments of just electrifying plays. I mean, against Arizona where he hit 3 huge threes in a row. So I'm excited for him to get fully healed, getting ready to go for March. I think he'll be a key piece for the squad in terms of momentum and keeping momentum.
For sure. BYU basketball, definitely a team to watch right now, whether you're a Utah fan, Utah State, UVU, BYU, Duquesne fan, whoever you are, right? You got to pay attention to this
For
team.
sure.
Cause
can we shout out UVU, though?
Yeah.
Getting WAC season champions, first time. I mean, I think that's great. I mean, I go to UVU. I'm in a little hiatus right now, but UVU student, I think it's electrifying. Chance to make the dance first time in school history. I mean, that's, I think, a storyline in and of itself.
Have they really never made the big dance before?
As far as my research goes, they have never made the dance.
I know the women's team has made it. Yet to appear. Yeah. Wow. Good for them. Obviously they got to beat Grand Canyon, probably in the finals of the WAC to do so, but in their final year, maybe they get next year. I don't know exactly when the move to the Big West comes for them, but it's good. Yeah, good for them. We're going to get 3 teams in the tournament this year. We'll get Utah State, probably 8 or 9 seed. Then Utah Valley, probably 13 or 14 seed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Utah Valley's been playing really well this year. It's exciting to see them doing well. I saw a tweet earlier today, them talking about, like, we kind of view Utah State as just like a really good program, right? They have so many head coaching changes over the past, 5, 6, 7 years, right? But they've just kind of remained consistent. I think Utah Valley now has the same thing, right? You have Mark Pope for a while. He goes to BYU. You have Mark Madsen and then goes to Cal. And I don't know who their head coach is now, but, they've kind of stayed a consistent program, and definitely going to be a team to watch if you're a local fan in the WAC tournament.
No, for sure. They're a great team. They have the energy. I mean, they have Toulson, Connor Toulson.
Think so.
It's a Toulson. I think it's Connor.
Yeah.
Transferred from BYU. He's a great baller. Quite frankly, watching some of their games, seeing how they beat Grand Canyon in Orem. I mean, they did get kind of handled at Grand Canyon. Like you said, I think it will come down to a UVU Grand Canyon championship in the WAC. Honestly, as of right now, UVU is a 14 going against A&M in Lombardi's bracket. That's kind of a scary matchup.
Yeah.
If I'm A&M, I mean, they have momentum. They are pumped. If you saw their video post game against Albert and Christensen, they were electric. You would have thought they won the WAC after that game. Like, not just the regular season title, but they had punched their ticket to the dance. Seeing how much excitement they have for this tournament stretch, I don't see how they don't get to the championship, then beat Grand Canyon. I think it's written in the stars for them.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked a good bit about this BYU basketball team here. Right? I think we're running at 45 minutes now on the podcast, depending on where we had some technical difficulties. We're gonna have some splicing to do, but I mean, this team's worth talking about, right? Obviously, college basketball is where the sports world is focused right now. But as we, kind of approach the end of the episode here in, I don't know, like 10, 15 minutes. Also, my computer is at 10%, so that's why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah,
but I think we should be good. Like, I don't worry too much. I'll keep an eye on it up there. Right. But I think we should be good. But let's hit the big points.
Yeah,
we talked spring practice for BYU is underway. Here's kind of the 3 big takeaways from today. Kalani says that Darius Lassiter, highly unlikely to return, which I think is good. I think it's good to get those young receivers out and give them some playing time.
Yeah, I agree.
And then with that, Keelan Marion, who people are saying might take Lassiter's role this year as a number 2 receiver, got a 45-yard touchdown today. He made a nice juke move on a defender. That video is up on Twitter. You can find it. But yeah, good day for Marion. And then also BYU, I don't know if he's number 2 or number 3 where he's at on the depth chart as far as the quarterback room. But McKay Hillstead, 70-yard touchdown run. And again, this is full padded practice. So,
I would expect him to be the number 2 guy behind Jake. I saw that pass, and that was a beaut. That was quite the throw. It's crazy because he could be the starting quarterback just as well as over Jake any given day in terms of raw talent. So I think it's great to have him as the number 2. I'm still taking Jake over him. Sorry, McKay, but he's a great baller. I think his time, if he sticks it out, his time will come and it'll be good.
Yeah, I mean it'll be exciting. Obviously, Rider Lions, hopefully, coming here soon, making his official visit to Sacramento State on March 17th.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Good for. I think it's like a 20-minute drive from his high school. So that's why. But
it's a complimentary visit.
Yeah, but our kind of big note we wanted to hit for college football was the realignment where we think like a mock super conference would sit. And I was taking some notes down beforehand. This is kind of where I see it happening. So between the Big 10 and the Big 12, there are 34 teams, and then the same for the SEC and the ACC. So each of those sides have 34 teams. That gets you almost 70 teams. If you want to just take those big conferences. Mm-hmm. But obviously you're going to want to take the players like Memphis and Boise State, maybe Army and Navy you could throw in there, right? That gets you to 82 teams. But kind of what I was thinking, if we wanted to, like if I was NCAA commissioner and had to, make a super conference and say, okay, this will be end all be all, I think you take the top 20 teams in each of those, maybe top 18, and you say, okay, we're going to combine the Big 10 and the Big 12. We're going to combine the SEC and the ACC. We'll take the top, 18 or 20, then we'll take the bottom, 16 or 18, and you'll create 2 separate divisions. You'll have an upper division and you'll have a lower division. You kind of take it like a European soccer approach, where the bottom 4 teams, get bumped down to that division. And the next year, the top 4 teams in the lower division all of a sudden get bumped up. So it kind of makes it competitive, even though you have a lower league and you have an upper league. It keeps it competitive. And then obviously, I think you can have a bracket where you take, okay, we're going to take 16 teams, 8 from this conference, 8 from this conference. Then maybe we'll seed them based on, okay, here's how they've done throughout the year, not necessarily playing in conference in the playoffs, but you take that and then you have a 16-team playoff with the top teams in the country coming from both that big conference, you could call it the Big 10 and Big 12, and then the SEC and ACC.
No, I love the European soccer model. I think it is undervalued when it comes to terms with American sports. I think we need to implement it more from a college standpoint, probably to like even an NBA standpoint. I think we could even get like basketball, especially in American soccer. I mean, I think there's talks. I don't think it'll ever happen because I think the MLS is a very selfish league, I guess you could say. But it would be amazing to have the MLS and USF, United Soccer, USL, or I think that's it. Partner, I guess, and have that top tier and lower tier. From the college football standpoint, I think that would be a really cool model to see. When I first thought of it, I almost thought of it. When I first thought of super leagues, the first thing that came to mind was how the NFL has structured their league and almost picking and splitting powerhouses on each side of the country. So, for example, SEC, I think, is without a doubt the most predominant football conference in the NCAA. I think to make it fair, if you were to do it, 1 league, 2 league, Bama, you're on one, Georgia, you're on the other, maybe SC, and rivalries I think you would have to keep just for tradition's sake. I mean, you go to NFL, you go to the NFC West, for example. I mean, LA, San Francisco, huge rivalry. You go Green Bay, Green Bay, Chicago, huge rivalry. So I think you got to keep the Utahs and BYUs, USC, UCLA's, probably Auburn, Alabama's. But determine whether or not you just split the country right in half, I think I'd have to do a little deeper dive. But I like the thought of mixing SEC, Big 12 conferences and mixing in two different kind of divisions, I guess.
Yeah.
That was my initial thought. Now that you mentioned the European soccer model, I think I like that even more. But
I think it would fit college sports really well. If we are going to go to a Super League, I think that's the way you have to do it, because then you're going to ruin it for the rest of everyone, because you're going to say, okay, well, if you want to play like real football, you got to transfer to these schools. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of where it would end up being. But next topic we had, if we want to stay, mock draft kind of deal, we talked about, a mock Team USA roster for the World Baseball Classic. I'll let you go first with your kind of list, and then I'll let you know.
All right. I'm going to go, so I'm not going to do a whole 30-man roster or whatever. I'll just put out outfield, and then outfield, infield, and probably dish out a couple pitchers. So in comparison to last Classics team and what players I want to keep, I'm keeping Mookie. I'm putting Mookie. I'll probably honestly put Mookie in left, because they didn't have Aaron Judge on that team. I'm bringing Aaron Judge. I'm putting him in right. Center field, that's where I've had some debate. I honestly might go Trout. I think Trout is very solid outfield, but you gotta put him on. One, so we can get the rematch of Shohei and Trout. That was electric. That had to be scripted. I'm sorry. There's no way in my mind. I'm like, that had to be scripted to have Shohei and Trout. Shohei pitching the final out to Mike Trout, former. Well, I don't think it was announced then. Maybe it was.
I think it was. Yeah.
It wasn't. It was former teammate to win the World Baseball Classic. You got to have Trout on there. Infield, I think I'll keep Bobby Witt at third base. He was on that team. I think I'm gonna keep him on third. Second base is tough. I gotta pull up some American second basemen, because all I'm thinking are non-Americans for sure.
I mean, what I did with my list, I took a couple shortstops and I just kind of moved them around the infield. It's I don't think it necessarily has to be a primary second baseman.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, who am I? I might let me come back to second base, shortstop. I think first baseman, I'm going to put Alex Bregman on there. I think we could probably, depending on who I put at shortstop, they could probably switch. I'd probably put Trey Turner in at shortstop, and depending on the backup first baseman, probably switch with Bregman, because I think Bregman can kind of play short and third. I already had a third baseman. Catcher, I don't know why, but I have a weird obsession. I like Will Smith. I don't think Will Smith is the most talented catcher.
He's a good, solid guy. On my list, I went with Adley Rutschman and JT Realmuto.
Adley Rutschman, for sure. I think overall, I would probably put him there. For some reason, I can't remember. He was the old catcher for the Yankees. Can't remember. It slipped in my head, but for some reason, I always think of him when I think of catchers. I'd probably put Adley. He's probably top. Am I weird to say top 5 players in the MLB?
Yeah, that might be a stretch.
Top 10.
Stretch in my book.
Still stretching, you think?
Yeah.
Okay, crazy take. Adley Rutschman is top 10 player in the MLB this year. Pitching, I think pitching is tough too. I mean, I feel like Clayton Kershaw, he was on the team last year. I think he's kind of sliding down in terms of quality. I think I might put him on there. I love Nick Pivetta, honestly, as a pitcher. I love him out there. Nicky Smooches. I also love
Evaldi.
Nathan Evaldi. I love Nathan Evaldi. He's been one of my favorite pitchers to watch when he's with the Red Sox, and then even when he left to go to Texas. I think that's probably my lineup. if I'm putting a DH out there, I'm probably going Stan. I think Stan's American. I'm putting Stan for sure, without a doubt. So that's my messy explained lineup.
I like it. I wrote mine down beforehand. I made sure because I knew that if I had to come up with it off the top of my head, I wasn't going to be able to. But here's who I have, and then I'm thinking for the rest of this episode, we can kind of just we have all these little notes on the side with NFL, NHL, and NBA. We can just kind of read the headline and then one word response on our reaction to it.
I agree. There's one topic that I might spew a little bit out, but
all right, we'll save that one for the end. I'll let you lead this out. We'll save that one for. Oh no, that's a lie. My computer's at 4%, so let's start with that one, and then we'll go with the one hitters.
Okay, got it.
But here's my team. Pitching pitchers, I got 5: Zach Wheeler, Tariq Skubal, Paul Skeens, Chris Sale, and Garrett Cole. Their relievers: Devin Williams, Josh Hader, Mason Miller of the A's.
Okay.
And Ben Joyce. I'm a big Angels fan. Ben Joyce throwing 105.1 miles an hour. There's no way you can leave him off the team. My infielders, including catchers, Adley Rutschman, JT Realmuto, Christian Walker, and Paul Goldschmidt. And then Garrett Henderson, Mookie Betts, Bobby Witt, Alex Bregman, and Nolan Arenado. And then my outfielders, I'm carrying a lot of players, like position players, so obviously that wouldn't happen. But Trout, Judge, Harper, Tucker, and Corbin Carroll. There's kind of my list of
yours was
who I want to
more
see.
Thought out. I think we'll have to touch back on this when we get closer to the baseball classic.
I like
have a more refined lineup, but we'll get to this one topic that I want to talk about because I think it's probably the biggest out of what we have listed, and that's Geno Smith getting traded to the Raiders. That has started the quarterback carousel, as media likes to say, for a third-round pick, which that is pretty good for the Seahawks because you don't get high draft picks, I feel like, anymore, compensation for players. The only reason why I think this is so big and why I wanted to talk about it real quick is because the Seahawks were on the brink of making the playoffs last year. They're a really good team in the NFC and the NFC West, and they just missed the playoffs. And now it gets me thinking what their plan is, because they released Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf requests a trade, which now I'm thinking maybe they just pinned it off like that, and now they trade Geno Smith. I mean, they just scrapped their entire all their offensive weapons. I think it's a great get for the Raiders because, quite frankly, looking at the quarterback room, it is dog. It is.
I mean, we talked about it last episode.
We talked
coincidentally,
about it, which is also coincidence. It is a bad quarterback room.
Yeah.
This makes them so much better. It almost gets you to think maybe DK follows Geno to Vegas.
I could see that.
But it scratches my head as to what Seattle is wanting to do or is planning to do.
Yeah. I wonder if Seattle could try and trade up and get a Cam Ward or get a Stur Sanders. And package DK Metcalf in that deal.
Maybe that's it. It's a strong quarterback class this year.
So. Yeah, so I could see them doing that. But my dad pointed this out when I sent him this news. He said it's good news for Jaren Hall, right? Jaren Hall in the Seahawks quarterback room. Good news for him if he sticks around. If they decide to enter a rebuild and don't pick up a super big name. Right? Jaren Hall obviously started a couple games with the Vikings, and before he was released by them, right, was considered to be a dominant, third stringer competing for the second string even with Sam Darnold, right? And so I think it's great news if you're a BYU fan, and it's good to see Jaren Hall. He's going to benefit from this trade, obviously, but yeah, definitely big news. I like Geno Smith on the Raiders a lot. I think that will be really good for them. I think they can pick up.
Too.
It'll be interesting to see if they go after a quarterback in this draft, which I think they probably still will. I don't know how much Smith has left on his contract.
It's 1 year left.
Okay. So yeah, I could see them taking it.
Right now, there's not been any restructure or re-extension from the Raiders.
Okay. Yeah, I could see him kind of mentoring Shedeur or Cam Ward or whoever they end up getting.
Yeah, it's good. Well,
or I could even see it being used as trade bait.
Yeah, that is also very true.
To trade up.
Well, in the sake of Cam's laptop
2%,
battery,
baby.
I think we'll wrap up this episode. We appreciate everyone tuning in, whether it's YouTube, Spotify. I think catch us tomorrow possibly. We might roll out a Scoreboard Sports post-game show maybe if...
We'll see.
We'll see how this game goes.
One thing I do want to note, though, obviously we're not going to talk about the NBA a whole lot on this podcast, and here's a bit why. The Cavaliers shot 51 free throws tonight. Boring, right?
Boring.
It's terrible. But obviously we're Jazz fans here. Walker Kessler tonight, how about him? Give him a shout out. 18 points, 25 rebounds, 13 of them offensive, and 8 blocks. First person to have numbers like that since Dikembe Mutombo.
He's the future for the Jazz.
Yeah, I love the fact that they didn't trade him at the deadline and give him to the Lakers. Danny Ainge looking like a really, really smart guy for keeping him around.
They've let him develop, and he's going to turn into a star for this team, 100%.
Who knows? Maybe if I get a Jazz jersey, maybe I'll have to get a Walker Kessler one.
Okay. We get Coop. I might be buying jerseys again. I might be in the market.
There's some other big news. You see what Boogie Cousins said about him?
Oh, I did.
Go look that up for everyone. We really appreciate you spending time with us here today on the Scoreboard Sports Podcast. Any departing words, Connor?
No. We'll see if we drop something special tomorrow. We'll see. But
hey,
we appreciate it. Go Cougs.